Hello, I'm Steph from I Drive a Classic, and today I'm back talking to you about a car that many of you will say, is that a classic already? It's the second generation Honda Accord. This particular example is from 1983, and it's a funny old world really, because for me this is far newer than stuff that I tend to consider classic, but with a growing JDM fan base, with the prices of these going up and up and up, and yet the supply is dwindling because of things like ULEZ, it feels like there's never been a better time to showcase one of these, give it a bit of love, appreciation, and hopefully cement its place within the world of emerging classics. So in today's video, if you've never watched one of these videos before, we go for a walk around the car, we talk about the history of the car, we show you some really cool features, and then we take it out for a test drive. If you have any questions at all, pop them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer it. But first, before any of that, we have a message about the channel sponsor. Life's too short to drive something boring, so make sure you do something about it this year. I would begin your journey on the Bidding Classics Auctions website. They've got some fantastic cars up for grabs. They've got everything from pre-war stuff right through to the 90s and early 2000s stuff, with an incredible mix of different marques, models and price brackets as well. Now, let's get back to that video and I'll show you what we're doing today. A Honda Accord might seem like mere street furniture to many of us over the age of 40, but for a new generation of car enthusiasts, this is a car which is fast gaining cult status as a classic, alongside other street furniture of the 80s, 90s and early 2000s. But where did it all begin? Well, the Accord came to market in 1976, and Honda brought the first generation out. It was made in Japan and Malaysia, and in fact they must have been pretty well made, because when I went to Malaysia last year, people were still using these as daily transport in some of the more rural areas. Now, knowing they were onto something good and having achieved market share in the Western car buying markets, which was a big thing in the 70s, Japanese cars started moving in, Honda created the second generation in 1981. Which then gave rise to the Honda factory in Ohio in America, and it made it the first ever Honda to be assembled in America. Now, despite having a fantastic motor industry of their own, Americans were captivated by this no-nonsense Japanese car, and it quickly gained the title of the best-selling Japanese car in the US, which was a position it held uninterrupted for well over a decade. But what does the car actually offer the discerning buyer? Well, if you're buying into the second generation, I understand it, first of all, it might have been slightly different for some markets, a little like that first generation. So the information I'm giving you today has been gleaned from a sales brochure, which was correct to the year of the car in England and I assume the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, Honda billed the second generation as a new style of Accord for today's style of motoring, promising the mid-range family car was one of the most sought after in the entire world, which actually might have been a true thing, because did you know that the Accord is the world's fourth most stolen car? Now, the new car promised a luxury and elegant four-door with a larger body shell to offer more interior space and a larger fuel tank and boot capacity, with the boot having increased by 25% and the fuel tank holding 2 gallons more of fuel. But they did all of this and they actually barely extended it in length from the first generation, so they did some really great things with the space they had available. Aerodynamics wise, it was completely rethought out to offer better MPG, and that's a big thing that they push. So if you look through all the brochures, they talk about that. But more importantly, for this era of cars after the 70s, where things seemed to rot at the speed of light, rust proofing and thoughts around safety as well were an intrinsic part of the build process. And the car was built in a new lightweight high-strength steel, which not only reduced excess weight, again helping the MPG, but also allegedly provided a virtually invulnerable buffer against the elements. How true that is, I honestly don't know. Honda boosted this then with high-strength steel plates to the front wheel arch, the bonnet skin, the floor frame, centre pillars, boot and tailgate. Now, if you're wondering why they did this, these plates were said to offer greater protection in the event of a high-speed collision. They also boasted better paint and prep to see the car outlast the competitors. So a little bit like that Volvo that we tested recently, we talked about that then as well, because they were doing some really similar things. Engine-wise, this particular car we're testing today was afforded the 79 brake horsepower 1.6 litre engine. I know some cars abroad or slightly later or slightly earlier have different engine specs as standard, but this refers to the model I'm testing here today. Overall, across the range in all the countries, Honda described it as one of the best cars in the under 2 litre market. The second generation came to an end in 1985 when it was replaced by the third generation. But the story doesn't stop there, because the Accord is still being made today, although it looks a lot different on the modern cars to this example we're testing here today. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to be sitting at home grumbling to their cups of tea and saying, oh, it's not a classic, but is it a classic? Now, I would argue yes, because this is a car with memories for so many people, whether it was their commuter car, mum's car, dad's car, or perhaps a car that they always walk past on their way home. A car doesn't have to be exceptional to be a classic. It just needs to take you back to a time and a place and bring back a feeling. Now, if you're still with us, let's have a look inside. It's ridiculous to think that this car is on 81,000 miles from new when the driver's seat looks so unused. In fact, the whole interior does. It's a really well put together car. And that's the thing about Honda, because when they made these, they said they wanted them to be both physically and psychologically comfortable. Physically comfortable was things like the materials used, the driving position, the enhanced visibility, the fact that you could adjust these seats 26 different ways. And if you went for the executive, so that's the one above this model, because there are only two that you can get, either deluxe, which is this, or executive, which is the one above. You could adjust their headrest 4 different ways. In this, it's simply up and down. But hey, that's a lot of movement and a lot of travel to give you the best driving experience. But what does psychologically comfortable mean? Because that sounds a bit bizarre. Well, the idea was when they got their team together, they highlighted that one of the key aggravators for the driver when they're out and about getting from A to B is noise inside the cabin, because noise is a big stressor. So they said, what we're going to do is we're going to work on that and make it as quiet as we possibly can inside the car. And they did it in a few key ways. So number one is they put a one-piece carpet straight through the car, so it runs from front to back, and they made it from material which had an enhanced sound absorption. I mean, whatever that might be made from. They changed the sound deadening material to absorb more sound. They even changed the engine mount, so it's got different engine mounts made from a different material to essentially drop some of those vibrations and to create less noise in there. The exhaust has been made differently, so that's quieter. And they've even looked at the design of the car and the aerodynamics to reduce the wind noise. So all in all, so much thought has been put into this. But what have we got inside? Because from the outside, you could probably walk past it, but inside, once you get in, this is where this really starts to shine for me. So you've got a glove box, and look, glove box is a glove box, but it's pretty sturdy. Again, I thought that was going to be quite flimsy, and that's great that that's there. Coming in the centre, and we'll quickly skip through this because this is where the exciting bit is. We've got a cassette player here. You've got your heater control panel here. Now, I will say that you've got a 4-speed fan on this, and also if you are looking at one of these to buy and you notice it's slightly different, it might be because it's the exec model. They got aircon, these didn't. Coming down from there, you've got your ashtray, you've got a cigar lighter, and you can even adjust the headlights. Now for me, that's a really nice detail. This wasn't a top of the range car. Bear in mind, this is as bottom spec as you can get for these, and to have that as standard, I think, is a really nice detail. But for me, the real magic is when you're looking directly in front of you, because this for me is such a great layout on a dash. It's clean, it's precise, and it's all there. Everything you want is there. So first of all, I want to show you something. Now this for me was something I totally wasn't expecting, and I bet you weren't either if you've never seen one of these before. So this button here is a brake lamp warning check light. Again, lovely safety feature that is so great to have on a car, and I just wasn't expecting it to be here. You've also got 4 horn buttons, which I'm not really sure why, but look, there's a lot on this car and I think it's great. Up above there, you've got your dash panel adjuster switch there. You've got a trip clock button. All of this is pretty straightforward. You've got your controls here to windscreen wipers, so you've got 2-speed there. Would have expected a twin speed anyway. And on the right hand side, you've got your indicators and you've got your lights. But for me, one of the nicest features here is this gauge layout. So running from left to right, you've got your rev counter over on the left hand side. In the middle, you've got this panel, and I really like this because this lights up to show you that doors are open on the car, and I thought that is a really cool thing. I mean, it's totally not something you need to have, but it's a really nice feature nonetheless. Coming down from there, you've got a temperature gauge and a fuel gauge, and on the right hand side you have got your speedo. Now I'm going to point out a couple of things on this speedo for you. So number one, you've probably spotted there's an L and a star. Well, this all relates down to the Honda-matic, because this is the 3-speed automatic gearbox, referred to as the Honda-matic system, and you've got different functionality on it. So you've got the overdrive, you've got the star, and you've got the L. And the way that you use it is you can just bang it in star and drive it as you want to drive it. But if you want to get maximum fuel capacity out of it, what you need to do is you need to use L for low speeds around town, and that shows you just on there. So once you're up just above 30 miles an hour, you need to flip into start, and then you go up from start into overdrive at just under 70 miles an hour. But the idea around that is that when you go into that overdrive and you're on motorways and long cruises, you're doing as much as you can to get the most mileage per gallon, and that's great. But in my opinion, I thought we were going to get a lot more. I believe the best you can get out of one of these is low 40s. I thought we were going to be getting kind of 50, the way that it really sells. Oh, you can get so much, it's so fuel economical. Just expected a little bit more, but look, I'm fussy. And over just below that, you'll see that you've got the service interval light, the engine oil change, and the oil filter change. Now this is really canny, because what happens is when those are due, they change from green into amber to say, look, you need to get this booked, and then it changes into red when they're like, look, this is overdue now, you're taking the mickey, sort this out. But to get these to reset, the garage doesn't do it for you. You actually slot your key into these 3 holes relating to whichever light you need to reset, and that's how you do it. Apart from that, you've also got a little coin box there, and that's pretty much everything. Now let's start her up, but before we do, there's one last thing that I need to show you, which is, and I've had to record it earlier because every time I try and replicate it, I accidentally start the car, that if you turn the lights on and then you open the door, see if we can do it. If not, I'll overlay the sound. Of course not. So I'll let you listen to the sound. I tell you what, that is a lot nicer than that Volvo we took out the other day and the Proton, which are like, eh. Can they not all adopt a jolly little tune? But anyway, I'm cracking on. We've got it in park. I'm going to start her up so you can have a listen. Now bear in mind, I've got the windows open. It's so quiet, and you're going to see when we go for a drive today as well that it doesn't automatically get really noisy when you're out either. So let's go from the back and then let's head out on an adventure. Okay, it's take 2, because the first time we tried to go on an adventure, the gimbal decided to die, which is definitely on my shopping list. I need to get a new one of those. It's come to the end of its life. But look, this is one of my happiest and easiest little test drives, and I'm going to be probably a lot more honest with you than perhaps some people might appreciate. And I'm going to say that 1980s cars really aren't my era whatsoever. I'm very much of that variant that we've been testing a lot of lately, that 50s and 60s golden age of motoring. I really like some of the pre-war stuff, and for me this almost feels like it's too new to be classed as a classic. But the world of classic cars is changing. Young people nowadays see stuff like this and they go absolutely wild for it, and I love that for them, because if that's what brings you joy, then good on you, and it's great to see so many of them being adopted and well loved. But what is it like to drive? Because when you get into 50s and 60s stuff, look, I'm going to be really honest that some of it you really have to reteach yourself how to drive. I've slipped into this today and I've never even been a passenger in a Honda Accord. And do you know how long it took me to learn to drive it? 30 seconds, if that. And that is the great joy about cars from this era, and in particular actually Japanese cars from this era, is that you can get into them and you can find your way around it in less than a minute. You get into it, you start driving, and you have a great time. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it for what it is. It's a 1980s car which has been incredibly well cared for. And even though we've got over 80,000 miles on the clock, there is very little noise inside the cabin. This gearbox is, I'm going to put my foot down so I'm going to show you, it's noisier than I thought it would be. And it's in that point between 50 and 60 miles per hour, just before you tick up into that overdrive. And that's where it seems to be noisiest. But look, that's a really small complaint, because the driving experience in this is so pleasurable in a way that I wasn't really expecting. I much prefer it to the Proton. If you've ever driven a Proton, this is far lighter on the steering, because these, and this is the deluxe car, the power steering doesn't come as standard. You have to go up to the exec level to get power steering. And I thought maybe it's going to be quite a heavy drive, and I was prepared for that because the Proton is a heavy drive. But this is so light and responsive. I mean, look, I'm barely moving that steering wheel and it's following me exactly where I wanted to go. And I guess you've probably noticed it when you're at low speeds a lot more. I think it'd be a lot more pronounced, because to get this full lock on this is 3.5 turns of the wheel without power steering, and with power steering I believe it's around 2.7 turns of the wheel lock to lock. And I guess it's really hard for me to critique it, because look, I've just got into it and I've thought, you know what, if something goes wrong with the Proton and I don't have much of a budget to play about with, I'm probably going to look at one of these. This is really just a great straightforward car to drive. It handles really well, as you can see. It picks up speed, it keeps up with modern traffic. It's quiet enough inside that I can hear myself think as I drive along, which is all I need to be able to do. And it keeps up, and I've got great visibility. I've got better visibility in this than I have the Proton, actually. And I feel very confident driving it to say that, well, I only picked it up about 20 minutes ago. It's fantastic. Look, I'm just cruising along. It's easy enough. And this is a really weird recommendation I'm going to give, but if you're a younger person watching this and you've been considering something from that JDM pool, or you're looking to buy something out of the ordinary that you're going to have really good fun with and that you're going to be able to get into a bit of a car community with, have a look at some of these Honda Accords. There seem to be, even though they're dying out at a worryingly rapid rate, there's quite a few great examples out there. You're not looking to spend mega bucks like you are something that's maybe badged Nissan. Some of the Nissan stuff now is making crazy money. These are still relatively affordable and you can get a great car for a really great price. I feel like stuff like Fords now, VW, it's all really overpriced. Even those hot hatches are overpriced. This is a really great little car. You've got plenty of room that you could chuck all your friends in. It's practical in that that split seat can fold down so you can get all your luggage in. And if you're doing a lot of travelling around, going to shows or for work, something like this isn't a bad shout. It's really comfortable. And because I was able to adjust that seat and I was able to get it to a position which I think is probably one of the most comfortable driving positions I've had, I think it's great. I will always stick to my 50s and 60s stuff as my preference, but I do like an 80s, 90s runabout for something that runs alongside it, that I can do long mileage in, that I can use when the weather's really bad. And this for me would tick all those boxes. The sad thing about these, just cross over those terrible potholes. The sad thing about these is I think a lot of these are probably going to get wiped out by the Scottish clean air zones, the ULEZ zones, things like that, Birmingham clean air zone. And it makes me so cross because there's so many of these that are great examples and they just need to be adopted and loved. So if you're looking for something that's cheap, retro, that you can have a really great time in, that you can do great swathes of mileage in without getting out and needing a chiropractor. Have a look at an early Honda Accord. I've so enjoyed driving this in a way that I wasn't really expecting. I'm going to hand the keys back now, but yeah, I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind for if something happens to the Proton, because these are fantastic and I would thoroughly recommend them. I've really enjoyed it, and I should also probably add that you've got a really great club community and you can also get all the spares and bits you need. So that's it from me today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a lot more modern than the stuff I've been doing lately, but look, it's not often that you get offered a car it's so exceptionally clean and original. So thank you so much, Dave, to the owner, for lending me the car, and until next Sunday when we're looking at something else which is probably going to be a lot older, take care and drive safely.